we can't leave without talking more deeply about measurement and optimization. So just a quick recap of where we've been so far. We started off with foundations, data infrastructure, data collection. We just talked about GA4 and activation and opportunities to leverage more advanced targeting in a world of signal loss and cookie deprecation. And now, how can we measure and optimize in that same world of signal loss and cookie deprecation? So I would love to welcome Courtney Fenstermaker, as we introduced her earlier, to talk about bid optimization with Google Cloud and Vertex AI.
Thank you. Well, I am very excited because we're moving into the optimization section, and I like to talk about tangible activities, takeaways, so that's what we're going to do today. I'm also going to start out by saying I am embarrassed to say I like to read a lot, but I tend to be that person who likes to skip to the last few pages to see what I'm getting into, because I don't love getting into a book and being disappointed. So I was going to take that mindset here today, and we are reading this book called Enhanced Bid Optimization with Cloud and Vertex AI, which is probably the most riveting title of a book any of you have ever read. And we see two things we're going to call out. One, your first-party data plus Google Clouds will lead to optimized marketing outcomes, which sounds good. But we also see only 9% of brands are actually recognizing the full potential of data-driven marketing. So based on what I'm seeing in these last few pages, dynamic duo, world in disarray that needs some saving. So we are going to jump right on in. And speaking of disarray, we know that marketing and advertising are facing a number of challenges. This is no surprise. Ad blocker usage is estimated between 30 to 40% across the US and the EU. Again, trigger warning. Universal Analytics has been sunset over the last 2 summers, and we are now in GA4, getting used to new tools, new data. Apple ATT opt-in rates are as low as 25%. We have seen a number of class action settlements, lawsuits over data privacy. And by the way, about 2/3 of your customers will say they will not continue buying from a company that misuse their data. And if you operate globally, this is a new fun twist. Some of the tools that you use may no longer be considered compliant today. So, really fun, super exciting. We're dealing with a lot of challenges at hand. So I want to jump into how can we address some of the challenges we face. And this should look somewhat familiar. Michael showed a similar visual, but this is a universal truth. We know that not every customer brings the same value to your business. And we also want to spend our time optimizing for high value customers, as well as reporting on those customers and then optimizing our ads for those customers. So we've got 3 examples here. Everything from $100 to $300 to $500 value to your company. And again, what you might have been doing now or in the past is conversion bidding. So maybe a target CPA model where across the board unilaterally you're bidding $10, and regardless of what the customer's value is. What we want to talk about today then is value bidding, which is thinking, how do I put more of my marketing budget towards that high value customer and decrease my budget towards customers that may drive less value? So very, very simple concept, but how can we actually do this today in our ad platforms? So when I was going through the value of the customer, some of you might have thought, what does value actually represent, especially if I'm not just a direct-to-consumer e-commerce brand? And value can be defined in 3 different ways here, so we're going to go through each of these. It's worth noting that value is going to be dependent on how you calculate your value for your business, when that happens, and it definitely can be dependent on your business model. So depending on what industry you're in, how you can actually capture and recognize revenue or value is what will drive where you might spend more time today. Well, we're going to start out with actual. And actual is the value that is realized at the time of conversion. So here we have this website. We're going to use PawShop to outline what we're doing throughout the day. So this will be a familiar visual. We've got a customer here who spent $94 on the website. And today we might just be sending that directly to Google Analytics, to different GMP platform products, as well as to Google Ads. Now what we know is that GMP and Google Ads do have some built-in AI features, things like smart bidding. We know it works. Google has run a study where they showed about a 14% conversion value lift when companies move from a target CPA, so bidding per action, to a target ROAS, which is giving Google your budget, letting them use their historical data, and deciding how to spread that out. And so we know that in-platform AI does work, and it does lead to some lift in conversion. The challenge with this is that 80% of advertisers are doing this already, which means about 4 in 5 of us in this room are already doing this. So it is not as competitive as it used to be. So if we're thinking about how do we get a bit more competitive with that same mindset, we'll use this example of having 2 conversions. And let's say conversion A, $100 revenue, conversion B, $100 revenue, and that's what we've been sending directly to those platforms. Now if we add in cost of goods sold, we can see these are not weighted equally. Now we can see, okay, conversion A is actually worth about $20 more to my business. So that makes a difference. You might be now thinking, how would I get margin to those end platforms? Because that seems like a pretty sensitive data point. I don't want my customers knowing what my margins are on every product, and I don't want that being put on the front end of my website. So Tyler talked a little bit about this earlier, where what we can do in an actual value sense is intercept that data before it's sent directly using server-side GTM, and then pass that information using Cloud Firestore to safely and securely bring that data together. So those 2 platforms, hopefully server-side GTM at this point looks familiar. We've talked about it a bit. That's what's actually enabling us to send data server-side from server to server. And the big piece here you can see in the middle, ability to append, modify, as well as enhance the data before it goes somewhere else. So this is a really critical piece of being able to do these advanced use cases because it lets us take the data we have and add more to that. Cloud Firestore is essentially where we are securely storing information that might be considered sensitive, or we just don't want it to be exposed on our front end. So again, by taking that $94 purchase, passing it through to server-side GTM, which appends and enhances the data using what's stored in Firestore. That comes back up to server-side GTM, and then it goes out to all the different platforms you use. And that lets us use margin instead of actual revenue, so we're bidding towards your bottom line. We're not trying to bid towards the top line, which might look pretty equivalent user to user, but if we can get down to margin, we're able to actually see closer to our bottom line who we want to spend more money on. So that's an example of how we do actual value realization. And that's probably something that feels at least somewhat in reach for many people in this room. So we're going to get a little bit more advanced each time. So that starts us out at least with something, but we're going to now move into proxy, which this is a general value that you understand at the time of your conversion. This is where you're going to start thinking about your upper and your mid funnel stages. And you're also going to be really heavily leaning into this when you don't have full visibility into macro outcomes. I primarily work with D2C and CPG orgs, and so this is really great, especially for CPG orgs I work with. This can also be really valuable for automotive, real estate, telecom, things that don't have that black and white conversion cycle. So we're going to use something that is a bit of a mouthful, aggregate data modeling for value-based bidding. So what this is using, this method uses aggregate data. So think of things like geo-level data, time series data, And then it predicts sales based on online activities that are happening. So it helps us understand what the relationship is between mid-funnel activities, offline sales, and creates a bidding formula that we can actually use in platform to change how much we are willing to bid based on online signals. This is a really great opportunity for businesses that say, I don't have a login on my site, I struggle to get user identifiers, because this is not dependent on user level data. This also doesn't depend on third-party cookies. We talked about 20% or so of your users are already not using those, and many more in the future. So this is a nice, durable solution that you can use just today. And it's really 5 steps. We're going to walk through the 5 steps at a high level. But the first step is to gather your data inside of BigQuery. So you can see here we've got an offline data set and an online data set in the blue. So offline, we've got date and we've got DMA. So when we talked about aggregate data, those are those detailed time series, geo data points, alongside offline sales. Now for this example, I am going to pretend that I run a CPG company that sells beauty products. So when I think about my online data set that I might be able to join, I still have date, I might have a DMA field in Google Analytics, but I also know I have a number of events that I've tracked inside of GA4. So I've got something like a virtual try-on, where a user can come on and try a shade of lipstick virtually to see what they think. I've also got a product quiz to help people find products that meet their needs. And I have a downloadable coupon, so when someone finds a product they like, they can go in store and make a purchase. So those are the types of online attributes, but think about any type of mid-funnel activity that might tie to making a sale later. Now, once you've gathered the data in BigQuery, the next step is probably what most people in this room will see as the most complicated piece, and that is creating and fitting a model. And so what we're talking about there, you bring that data together in BigQuery, and then we use an econometric model, which is a regression, to compare the trend of online activities with your offline sales. So we want to look at the relationship in a very simple way. Preferably, we want to look at it at a daily level, which everybody wants daily real-time data. So you can definitely do this, and it's recommended daily. You can do it weekly as well, but certainly more recommended on a daily level. And we're looking at those mid-funnel activities, the offline sales, and looking at a relationship to come out with correlation coefficients. So this might sound familiar if you've taken statistics at some point or another, but we're trying to do basic statistics here to drive bid optimization. So we've got those same 3 activities from before in the online chart. And next to them, we have a number of different correlation coefficients, which help us understand what is the relationship between the online event and the offline sales. And that's what we call HVAs. Michael talked about that a little earlier. This is how we determine our HVAs. We're doing statistics, we're running a regression, and we're getting correlation coefficients that help us understand that relationship. And then we're translating those HVAs to activation. So here you can actually see you have your different GMP and Google Ads up at the top. You can use these for weights within those platforms to decide how to adjust your bids based on someone completing these activities on your website. So you may not have a direct purchase on your website, or you might, but you might also sell primarily offline. This is a great opportunity to take the data that you are collecting and not just report on it, but actually use it to change how you spend. And I would not work in analytics if I didn't recommend that you then test and use experimentation to make sure you are seeing a return and higher ROAS using this model. You can do that through A/B testing. You can do a pre-post test. You can do a geo experiment by looking at different areas and testing this out. But it's really important you test. Not just one time to say, yep, it worked, this was good, worth our time, but that the model is still representative over time, because we know that consumer brands or consumer behavior changes over time. So we want to make sure that there are additional high value actions that should get added into this model. So this is how we would use a proxy to drive our bid optimization. But the final one is really the most exciting one, I would say, which is your predictive, looking at calculating at the time of conversion based on different signals that you might have. So just to recap, actual, we're thinking about bringing in margin instead of revenue to bid off bottom line. Proxy, you're thinking about those mid-funnel, high-value actions that we can use for bid optimization. And now predictive, we're thinking about taking this a step further. So we have the same exact two conversions from before. Before we said, hey, conversion A looks more valuable. It's about $20 more valuable to our company, so we're going to bid more on conversion A. What if, instead of margin, we took it a step further and we said, what is the consumer's behavior in the future going to be? And also we can take an example of something that affects many, especially e-commerce brands, which is returns. And we think, how do returns factor into this? And so we're going to do that here just as an example. First, we add in predictive lifetime value. So it's thinking, what are they going to spend in the future with me? We layer that in. All of a sudden, we see the consumer that made conversion A is going to spend in the future $150 with my company. So it's pretty good. Conversion B, nothing. What does that mean? They were a one-time buyer. They're never planned to purchase again from you, which is a real thing that happens. Many of us have experienced and seen in our data. So that makes a difference. Then we look at predictive return rate by looking at what products they purchased and saying, are those products that people typically return? And if so, do I want to bid on a customer that is likely to return a product? So we pull that in here. We can see conversion A expected to return about $5 worth of merchandise. Conversion B, $10 of merchandise. And all of a sudden, what was a $20 margin difference is now a $175 difference in expected conversion value, which makes a massive difference in what we would be willing to bid and optimize our spend towards. So what is different this time? Hopefully this visual continues to look familiar, but there is one difference. Still have a $94 purchase on PawShop. Still using server-side GTM to capture that transaction. Now the difference this time, instead of pulling that information from Cloud Store and pulling additional attributes, we're talking about Vertex AI at the bottom there, which really makes all of this possible. I'm going to talk a little bit more about Vertex AI, but by pointing server-side GTM to an endpoint in Vertex AI, that's how we're able to get those additional data points that really make a difference in how we see a customer's value. Once it goes to Vertex AI, back up to server-side GTM, and then to all the platforms that you use. So Vertex AI, very simply put, it's part of Google Cloud Platform, machine learning model that, or machine learning platform that allows you to train and deploy your machine learning models as well as your AI applications. The steps here, it's going to sound really familiar to what I just said in the Q&A and what Ash had reiterated. One, you need to identify what your use cases are. So we just used an example with predictive lifetime value, which is just a regression model. We also use predicted return rate, which is just a propensity model. So those are two use cases. There's a number of additional use cases. Those are just two, but that's where you want to start, is say, what models do I want to use to build around my use case for my business that makes sense? Now, once you have identified the use cases, you're going to actually deploy those models to an endpoint in Vertex AI. On the back side, we're configuring our client-side GTM, server-side GTM, and GCP to take and send that data to. And no surprise, we still need to design and execute a test to make sure that we measure the impact of leveraging Vertex AI. So some familiarity there. All of these things help us to measure the value that a customer brings to our business and decide what model of bid optimization makes sense. But again, how does this kind of all tie back together to where we want to go to maximize and be part of that 9% and hopefully growing that use data-driven marketing? So I'm going to use an example of a bowl of ice cream. I'm highly allergic to dairy, so this was my closest shot to getting ice cream on the screen here. So we think about making a big ice cream sundae. We start with a bowl. That is our foundation. That is our baseline. In-platform AI within GMP and Google Ads. That's a good foundation for us to start in. And again, we do know it works, so there's value to leveraging that. But just like a bowl and an ice cream sundae, this is table stakes. This is setting the stage. We don't want that to be our only model or only method. So we expanded our actual value use case to leveraging margin to train the AI for a bottom line outcome instead of your top line revenue. That looks a little bit better, definitely better than just an empty bowl, to have a little bit of ice cream in there, but of course we want to take that a little bit further. And that's where we started to talk about the proxy, which is using that aggregate data modeling, thinking about those mid to upper funnel stages, and assigning conversion values to those to influence our bid optimization. And last but not least, we're using Vertex AI to create and utilize the predictive models that let us actually include those as well in our conversion values and get the full picture of what our customer is driving from a now and future standpoint. With the goal that when you use all of these things combined, that is how you are going to get that boost in your conversion uplift and your ROAS, because you're hitting many different angles of the customer and the value they may drive, again, today, but also in the future with your business, which is hopefully the best treat you could ask for. So we are back here, and we see only 9% of brands are realizing the full potential of doing data-driven marketing, which is what we just talked about. All of these things are enabled by your data. We're not relying on external data sources. We're not relying on technology that might change from other vendors. We're thinking about data that you own. You spend a lot of time to collect. Only 9% are doing that. And that's leveraging the data you own, bringing it and using a tool like Google Cloud to lead to those optimized outcomes. And because this is pretty untapped, I always like to say this is the perfect time to enter this 9% and grow it, because 80% are using in-platform AI. That's table stakes, but there's a lot of open room to test this out, to learn from it, to optimize it, and to use this to solve all the challenges that we've been talking about all day today. So thank you for your attention. Hoping you bring us some tough questions later today, and that we're gonna move into our next session, which is around attribution. So all of that combined should help kind of tie it together, how this ends up being measured and improved as well. Thank you.